Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission meeting tonight, May 11, 2023. Call to order. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for the contributions which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Item 2, approval. Yes.
We should do roll call.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Idea.
Abbott,
Here?
Commissioner Bensman,
Here.
Commissioner Chang Frank,
Here.
Commissioner Martin,
Here.
and Chair Kent.
Here.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor. Approval of minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? From March 9th, 2 months ago.
I'm happy to move that we approve the minutes.
Yes, please.
Yes, I do. I move. Therefore, I do.
I will second it. All in favor?
You want to roll call it?
Commissioner Abbott,
Yes.
Commissioner Bensman,
Here, yes, sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Martin,
Yes.
and Chair Kent.
Yes. Item 3, public comment. Do we have anyone wishing to make any public comment?
These are for things that are not on the agenda, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I should read it. You're right. I'm rushing this because I feel late. I feel pressured to catch up.
Oh, no.
I will slow down.
There you go.
So for persons desiring to address the advisory body on an item that is not on the agenda, please note that each speaker is limited to up to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the commission's ability to take or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff or comment for a future agenda. Having said that, are there any public?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, and there's nobody here at the meeting that has their hand raised. Item 4, announcements. Any commissioners want to share any things they did on behalf of the commission?
Yeah, I mean, I attended the city council meeting that was discussing the sugar sweetened beverage tax proposal. I just actually made a comment as myself, but I didn't identify myself as a commissioner, and I gave a little background on the sand court volleyball, what kind of comments we received, et cetera. I also gave them like a budget amount because it wasn't included in our memo, and we didn't really talk about that, so it was understand why. I just wanted to give you all feedback on what their thought process was because it was illuminating to understand why they rejected our proposals. I think the water line, and I'm sure Mark really could talk about the water line to the Albany bulb, that's like just prohibitively expensive. So that's just one thing. But we didn't even, I'm not sure that that was even much talked about. I think what they did want to fund were projects that could be completed within the fiscal year. And so anything that was vague, like the sand volleyball court, would have required public comment process, scoping, siting, et cetera, something that they knew wouldn't be able to happen in a year, they didn't even want to consider. So I wouldn't say that they thought it was a bad idea, they just didn't want to consider anything that couldn't actually be just completely completed and done. And I think part of that, it seemed like, was the year prior's budget hasn't even been expended yet. So they don't want to just keep on putting the money aside to projects that won't be completed. And you were there too, right, Mark? I don't know if you.
I did not attend that.
Okay.
But my own.
I think your microphone's off.
Oh, there you go. I did not attend it, but I did review it. I had another commitment, and Allison was there. But yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. There's idea of wanting to be able to execute a project quickly, and even something, we have the bike rack or the bike locker out at the bulb. It's been, purchase order has been issued since November, and we're just waiting. And so some of these things are in our control, some of the things are outside of our control.
Yeah. So I think if we're going to be more likely to get something that we want funded, we should just be really clear about what it is. It can be discrete. And it seems like the ones that they want to fund are just, just no public debate needed. Just like, let's just replace something that needs to be fixed. And so I shouldn't say that. It's just there was no sort of citing or any other kind of agency process that needed to be completed. So
Did you get the sense that for the sand volleyball, we should agendize that ourselves, have public meetings, even though we have no funding, and then present?
what I wanted to talk about maybe during the Flex Committee, subcommittee, because we have that on the agenda, is how we can change that to be more of a subcommittee looking at other recreation opportunities that the master plan has identified. Because I did have a sense, and I think there was a comment by Mayor Preston, he's not a mayor, city council member Preston Jordan, and others, that they were interested in that kind of thing, but that it needs to be investigated. So if we can take that on as a commission, and it seems like we have the impetus to do that with the master plan direction, but that's something maybe, Jumeirah, you could help us with. I think it might need to go back to council to ask them if we can work on it with our work plan. So I would say it's an opportunity for sure. It's definitely an opportunity.
Thank you. Any other updates? I went to the Friends of Five Creeks gathering Tuesday morning on the creek. There was the City of Albany, City of Berkeley, University Village, and some other agencies represented there, as well as volunteers, talking about the MOU that's being signed amongst the cities and the university and how to maintain the creek. It was all very interesting, seeing the details of the issues that the volunteer group is confronted with. And it looks like Berkeley is stepping up to the plate and doing a lot. We'll see how it all pans out, but it was a very encouraging meeting overall, I thought. Mark was there.
If you want, I can give, we had a little discussion about the results of that. There was not only the walk, but Friends of Five Creeks did a survey, and so we had some people, who weren't there that expressed, expressed ideas. But we talked about in a meeting today about how we would tackle some of these in our, in the context of the MOU today. So I think, and some of them are pretty unique. Like I think the bioswale was one of them where we talked about. We thought that would be ideal for a scout project. So we kind of packaging it and kind of shopping it around to the troops for a scout project. So
That's a very advanced scout project. Yeah, maybe, yeah. So they were thinking of adding some more bioswales on 6th Street?
6th Street, yeah.
Now, currently, all the water runs right into the creek, and that's all the trash off those streets is collected and no filtration. So I guess we'll hear more in the future on that.
Yes.
Great. Moving on to presentations. First one is our Eagle Scout presentation. Where is he?
I have to get Margo.
Oh, I saw somebody's hand raised. Was that, no, not that matter. Public, I thought up there.
Margot, you should be allowed to talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
It's a scout.
Yes.
Okay, good evening. I'm Margot Cunningham, Natural Areas Coordinator, and I want to introduce Nicholas Primer, who is an Albany High student. He's in Boy Scout Troop 14, and he has a project that he will be doing on Albany Hill, and he wants to tell you about it. Afterwards, you can ask us any questions. And I believe he wants to be able to share his screen. If you could make him a panelist and allow him to share his screen.
He should be a panelist by now.
Yes, he should be good to go.
All right, thank you guys for having me tonight. Okay, so, hello everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Nicholas Primer, as Ms. Cunningham just stated. I'm a current resident of Albany and a junior at Albany High. I'm also a part of Albany's Scout Troop, Troop 14. In order to obtain scouting rank Eagle Scout, or the highest honor possible, I need to complete a community service project. Tonight, I'm going to give you a quick presentation about my Eagle project. Okay. I will be overseeing the construction of 3 separate sections of handrails on Albany Hill. Everyone see my arrow on my screen?
Yes.
Okay. The handrails will be built on a trail just below the street, Jackson Street. The photos of the existing stairs. The handrails are going to be built along these red arrows right here, these 3, in order to maintain and prevent erosion. Handrail posts will be made from milled eucalyptus from already cut trees on Albany Hill from the leftover projects that were just constructed a little bit ago. And the rails will be made from redwood branches. All of the wood will be supplied by the City of Albany. So on the left here, you can see the redwood rails. These will be milled as a part of my project, so people will be able to actually grip it without any discomfort. And on the right, these are my my eucalyptus posts. My project will take place during the summer of 2023, this summer, and it will span over multiple weekends. The scouts from Albany's Troop 14 will be the primary source of labor for the construction of the handrails. Thank you for having me. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, it's great you're working on that. That's sorely needed. I was wondering if you know what the plan is to anchor those posts so that they will stay vertical and last for a long time.
So I went and talked to an engineer and house designer, and we had a couple solutions. One was to use concrete to anchor them in place with a bottom bit of gravel for draining, which will happen either way. But I recently just did a mock-up in my backyard, which unfortunately I don't have the pictures from yet, but the posts are very solid, just put into the ground. So I think in order to not have to pour concrete in our lovely hill, I'm just gonna put gravel underneath them and put them in the ground.
Okay. I'd be curious if Mark has a thought on that for Public Works as far as, because it's one thing if something seems to work well in your backyard, but when it's out there in the public and people are, kids are climbing on it, people are leaning on it, and it gets used for years, that might be a different consideration. So Mark, do you have any thoughts on the anchoring of those posts?
So this is the first time I've seen this, so I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but I see your concern, and maybe we can talk with Margot and Nicholas and maybe even do a test run and see how sturdy we can get it. I see the not wanting to lug a bunch of concrete up there, and that has its drawbacks too, so maybe we can find something that works, or we can test this and see if it works as well. Mm-hmm. Or we just...
I have something to say about this.
Okay.
So this idea of putting the post into the ground with gravel underneath has been done in other areas, including Friends of Sassel Creek did this same type of construction for their rails that they had done in Oakland, and it's plenty sturdy. Maybe it won't last as long as concrete, but I think we don't want to impact the hill too much. When you're digging a hole and pouring concrete, it's going to have more of an impact on plants around the area. So I would prefer it if we did just the post into the ground with the gravel, and I think it will last plenty long time.
Yeah. Okay. I'll concur with Margot.
Any other questions?
Nope, I don't have any questions.
Yeah, I guess mine are the same. I think there's probably a lot of standard details out there for just such a a strong footing. And I thought the general rule of thumb is a third of the post should be in the ground. So if you're going up 42 inches, you want about 18 inches in the ground. It's a pretty deep hole, but yeah. Well, thank you.
Oh, wait, actually, sorry, I do have a question. I'm just curious for you, Mark, are you going to approve sort of what actually happens out there? Just wondering what the process is for the installation.
So I think, there's two parts of approval. I think, yes, we will make sure that whatever gets constructed is what we want and is something we're going to live with. I think as far as the scout, there's agency buy-off on signing the documents and whatnot, and Margot will handle that since she's worked with the scout to this point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, well, I definitely see the need. So thank you for considering doing your project in Albany.
Can I just say, I just want to, not a question, just want to say thank you for the presentation, and also thanks for the thoughtfulness of using Albany wood. It sounds like it's going to be beautiful, and I really appreciate that it's going to be Albany resident, Albany, not kids, but teenagers building it. So I thank you so much for the presentation and the work.
It's my pleasure.
Do we have public comment? Have we already checked for that?
No hands are raised.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to the next agenda item, which is the item 5-2, storm response impacts and follow-up on
That's mine, right?
activities to the park maintenance response.
So now I go.
That's you, Mark, right?
Yes. Okay. And now I go here. Right. Why does that? Okay. So let me make sure I can page up and down. There we go. Okay, so this is just a high-level overview of this year's storm season. As we all know, this is one for the record books, and it was challenging in a lot of ways. But actually, on a real high level, I think Albany fared well. There are definitely some issues that we'll talk about, but by and large, I think we didn't see some of the issues that we had that other cities were seeing. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about sort of the response to the storms, the impacts, and then what we're doing is sort of follow-up activities based on what happened. So we're looking at the storm response. It really kicked off on New Year's Eve. I don't know if you remember, that was an amazingly strong storm, and it really went all the way through the end of March. The last really large storm we had was March 21st. And even, I guess we could put, it rained last weekend, which is surprising too. But the way we see it, there were 5 or so major events where we actually took some proactive action of how to respond, and then just a whole host of smaller events. They seem to just run one into another throughout this whole period. This was unique. On the January 4th, I think, by and large, everyone was caught on their heels on the December 31st storm that really was much larger and than I think any of us anticipated. And when we were projecting similar sized storms later in the week, we actually, as Albany as well as the rest of Alameda County, activated the EOC. And that got us to really thinking about how we're responding. And some of the things we came up with were staggered schedules. One of the concerns, our big concern, was we were projecting this to be up to a 3-day storm event with then another one coming in over the weekend. And realizing that we have a fairly limited crew. We have 6 crew members that we wanted to not tire them out on the first night and then have no response capability for the rest of the time. And the more we tax our maintenance workers, the more susceptible we are to injuries. So we did a schedule where we had 2 maintenance workers come in earlier, 2 people come in, say mid-morning, that goes to later in the afternoon, and then we had 2 that came in later in the afternoon and stayed late at night. And so that gave us coverage throughout the storm. The other thing we did was we pre-positioned some tree crews. One of the things we run into sometimes is we're sort of a small fish in some ways, and if we're having tree issues, other people are having tree issues. So we sometimes not able to get crews when we need them, and this was such a big storm, or projected to be such a big storm, we were really concerned. So we actually essentially bought a tree crew for 5 hours. We started at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then had it through I think they were there through midnight ultimately. And that gets us through the bulk of the storm. And that really helped out in terms of our response. And again, not taxing our crews because as we'll see in some of the other slides, there was a major tree came down on Solano. And it was nice to be able to have the tree crew respond to that while having our crews go to other places in the city. And that otherwise, that would have tied up our crew for the entire evening.
And for the public, can you define what the EOC is?
Emergency Operations Center.
And what did that look like when it's activated?
This one was probably less spectacular than some of the other ones. It was, we had, I think, a couple of extra firefighters on staff who were monitoring calls coming in, and we had really a team effort of when calls came in, we triaged it. Jamira played a tremendous role in taking calls and getting them out to various folks. So in this case, it was really a communication and monitoring mode.
Okay.
I think larger events, it would have had more activity.
Because we have an EOC center, like a building with backup power and all that. So this wasn't so much people in the command center as it was people.
So there were people in the command center,
Oh.
but it was essentially a firefighter getting calls, monitoring.
Dispatch, kinda.
Dispatch,
Okay.
and triaging what needed to be done, whether it's Public Works, PD, or their own resources. And I believe the EOC stayed open in what was called monitoring phase for another couple days after that storm, just because we're expecting more, and if we needed to ramp up, we wanted that structure to be there. And again, the pre-positioning of the tree crew was, I think, a tremendous success and something we're going to continue to do because it really makes our lives easier. There was also great collaboration between Public Works, Fire Department, PD, and in this case, CERT. I don't know what CERT is, a Community Emergency Response Team. Yes, okay. I was like, okay. So we reached out to CERT and say, oh, hey, or they reached out to us, how can you help? And one of the things we came up with is can you help us manage catch basins? Because that's one of our biggest issues from a flooding perspective. We spend so much time cleaning storm drains that when a big wind event comes in, all the leaves and branches come from the trees, they get caught in the storm drains in the catch basin and back up the water. So I think this was an amazing success. People took ownership of the catch basin near their area. And I have to share one story that was amazing. I was at the Ocean View Park, and that's where they do the sandbags. And we're filling up sandbags, and this guy comes in a pickup truck. The whole bed of the pickup truck is just filled with leaves and things. And he's getting some sandbags for his house and whatnot. And he goes, well, where can I get rid of these? I'm like, where'd you get these? Well, I'm in CERT, and I've been cleaning catch basins all day. And I'm like, oh, come on down to Public Works. We'll take care of this one, because it was amazing how much material he got. And that would have taken a crew member for 4 or 5 hours to do. And so it like things like that, everything from even just alerting us to where there are issues to people out there in rakes and clearing catch basins to the extreme. This one individual helped, actually, taking it, hauling it away. It was just amazing. And while we didn't activate CERT through this, the subsequent storms, I drive around and you see people out there clearing storm drains. So this was really helpful to us, and I think it helped mitigate a lot of the flooding that we normally see. And then sandbags. We went through an amazing number of sandbags. Typically, we would put out 5 to 6 cubic yards of sand for an entire winter season. we went through close to 30 cubic yards. So that's just an amazing amount of sandbags. And I think that helped also mitigate some of the flooding issues. So people were really out there being proactive, doing, protecting their property. And so I think that was a tremendous success. And there was a lot of sort of public engagement around this. We did city manager reports. I think we did e-news. We did, email blasts. We were putting it out there. Come and get sandbags. Here it is. And it was tremendously successful, I think. And now a little bit on the impacts. So I think one of the bigger things was localized flooding. We had a lot of that, and some of this is sort of outside the park world, but I think it all sort of ties together. We had localized flooding, and probably the biggest issue we had was on the New Year's Eve storm. This was out at the construction out at Marin. This is Marin and Evelyn. There was so much water, and it was getting into abandoned utilities, and it was flowing into our trench. We actually had a bit of a trench failure. We were concerned about sinkholes forming, and on some level, I was down with my parents, but I was very concerned about how this was going. The contractor responded. Had amazing response. Our CIP manager, Allison, was out there most of the night as well, stabilizing it, and we took care of it and really limited what sort of damage happened in that area. But that was probably our worst issue. Everything else was localized flooding in the areas where we typically get localized flooding, and once you clear the storm drain or it stops raining, it clears pretty quickly. And so we're pleased that there was no larger sort of flooding issues. And then the other thing is no SSOs, and these are sanitary sewer overflows. I don't know if you recall, last year we had an SSO during a fairly large storm, and this was parallel to Cerrito Creek, and some of the flow got into the creek, and so that's a significant issue for us. This year, we did spend a lot of time prepping for this, and specifically that area, and making sure. We did a deep dive into what happened there because we had cleaned it and in a pretty regular schedule. We were thinking that there was just so much water in the area that there's fat oils and greases build up in the pipe that got lodged down and created the SSO. So we spent a lot of effort making sure that those sections of pipe were clean, and we really had no sewer-related issues because, as a result of the storms, which is pretty significant, because there was a tremendous amount of water. I'm trying to remember the numbers, but we work with East Bay Mud in terms of managing the sewer systems, and they did some analysis, and they thought the amount of water was somewhere around like a 2,000-year event. So that's just amazing amount of water in a short period of time. So through this period, we also had 3 what I would call significant tree failures. These are kind of larger trees or hit something. We had lots of branches that came down, and then 2 smaller trees in addition to the 8. These were smaller trees, street trees that just maybe blew over or whatnot, and really not particularly eventful, but not particularly spectacular damage or whatnot. We also had a lot of concerns from landslides on Albany Hill, particularly on the eastern slope. As you can imagine, residents on that side were very concerned, both with the trees as well as the amount of debris coming down. So we jumped on that and had some analysis. I'll go through that later. And then with that, we also were concerned about trees along Taft and Albany Hill. So we closed those areas because we didn't want people in that area. We didn't have the staff to go up and deal with any issues, so we closed that. Okay, on the tree failures. So these are the trees. So we had 2 large eucalyptus on Solano. I have some pictures of these ones. So those were one set of trees that failed. We had 3 eucalyptus trees on Albany Hill. We had 1 oak on Pomona, another oak on Albany Hill, and this was between Jackson, the trail, this is between Jackson and Madison. And then another tree on Visalia. It was a street tree. I don't have the information on the type of tree, but it was significant because it wasn't a huge tree, but it was significant because it fell in and damaged the adjacent house. So that's why I made it on this list. So street trees. So this is the, and it's interesting. We had issues with trees early in the season and then again late in the season. So this one happened on January 4th. This is, the second storm of the season. And then the second one I'll show you happened on the 21st. So very, very interesting. This was one of the large ukes on Solano. This one happened to be across from Gordo's. And we were actually very lucky that this one, it damaged 2 cars, but it could have been much more damage. And if someone was in one of the cars, could have been a significant issue. I show the trunk, but I also show the tree well where it came from. And I'll show you on the next slide, you'll see what I'm showing out. This was a little bit concerning for us. Here's the next one. This was, again, one of the large ukes on Solano, across from China Village. And again, you can see the tree well. What we were concerned here is that, and I'll just jump ahead, this is the large oak on Portland, but this is between Pomona, between Portland and Washington. And the big thing here is the relatively small amount of sidewalk damage for both the March 21st tree as well as the January 4th tree. You figure for a tree that size, there was relatively little damage to the sidewalk around the tree well, whereas the tree at Pomona, we had a tremendous amount of damage. You have a section of sidewalks lifted up with the tree, and it was 5-6 feet in the air. So we'll talk about that more, but that was something that surprised us. And according to John, he didn't expect these trees to fail. He thought there might be branches. So this was something that we're going to look into a little bit deeper. And again, this is the Portland tree, or the Pomona tree. Then we get to Albany Hill. So I have 2 pictures from the March 21st. There was another tree that came down on the January 4th event. So the tree on the left is a tree on Taft, right at the hillside. This is right when you turn up and go on Taft. You could see the large eroded area came down, and then that impacted the tree, and the tree, I think I can point it with my pointer. Does this? Here we go. This is the tree here. This fell, and this was, you don't get the scale with this picture, but this tree fell into an adjacent tree, and we were concerned if that went, it would take out the power lines as well as hit the residential structure across the way. And this happened so late in the day that we couldn't deal with it at night. It just wasn't safe to work around the wires and so forth. So we essentially had people watching this all night just to make sure nothing went wrong, or if something did go wrong, we could deal with it. And then again, this is the picture on the right. That's a tree up Taft that went down. This is it's the downslope, so it's between Taft and Jackson. But that came down and crossed the road. And again, it was closed, so that was...
That one was weird because it fell uphill.
So some of these trees, the way they work, so what we found out is the root ball, and then you get erosion, and so they either slide this way, or depending if it's a drop off, it'll drop this way. So it's really a sliding motion.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the trees. I don't have pictures of the other 2 trees, but these were the ones that were most significant in my mind. So on the Albany Hill, the eastern slope, the landslide concerns, as you can imagine, everyone there was really concerned. The wind was howling in that area, and there was just a tremendous amount of water. There was material sloughing off the slope. So one of the things we wanted to do, just to make sure we didn't have a larger problem with slope stability, we engaged Nino Moore. This is a geotechnical engineering firm that we use fairly regularly for materials testing and other work. And they did I wouldn't call it an in-depth review, but it was a review of, hey, do we have a larger issue? The good news is they didn't observe any sort of slope instability or pending slope failure. So we knew that the hill itself is stable. It's just we dealing with this sort of erosion sloughing. They called it colluvial deposits that slough off the hill. And there was lots of that. And that's due to the excess water. And so we actually entered into a really good conversation around short-term and longer-term measures of how we can manage the water better and look at things that we might look at implementing on Taft to better distribute the water. Because I think what's happening is it's running off, and over time it's created a gully, and it just runs down that gully, and that's where you concentrating water on a slope it's not great. And so here's some pictures. Again, that I'm showing that the first tree that came down, because that's, I think, one of the better pictures we have of the slope instability or the sloughing off. You see it again. I think this one on the right is on Jackson. Let's see. Then this one is up on Taft. Another thing I learned, and this is the last picture on the right, it's that bench that's 4 or 5 feet off the, graded into the slope. That's actually a debris bench. So it's designed so that when things slough off, it catches there rather than sliding down and damaging vehicles or whatnot. So, one of the things we're going to look at doing is better managing that space and keeping that material off. But it's a little tricky because some of the more recent deposits we can take out safely, but some of the older stuff that's there, it's been, I don't think that's been maintained for a very long time. So some of the deposits we wouldn't want to touch because I think we might create more sloughing, and I don't think we want to do that. So follow-up activities. On the Solano trees, we want to do a more in-depth survey on the trees. One of the things that came up in our recent kind of coordination with community development is that we have this outdoor dining going on. So we want to make sure that trees are going to be safe for putting a restaurant activity underneath one of these trees is a little frightening. So what we're not frightening, but we want to make sure we do our due diligence. So what we're looking, and John's working on the scope of this, we're going to take a number of the trees, we're thinking initially maybe 9, and doing a deeper analysis on those trees, a survey, and then take a subset of that, potentially 3 or so, to do more survey around the roots and figure out why these large trees seem to be breaking off without a lot of root damage, and try to figure out what's going on there, and then come back. And we'll come back to the commission with what we find on those through those studies. And then on Albany Hill, this is on the Jackson and Taft. Again, we're evaluating trees that are what we deem would be hazardous, and we'll do what we've done on previous hazardous tree removals out on the slope, where we'll identify the trees, go through our process, and we'll update the commission on when we take them out. And then on the Albany Hill erosion and water mitigation, again we have let's see, I think Taft section is identified for a slurry seal project, and we're going to do a slurry seal, and then we're looking at maybe doing some curbing work away from the edge to sort of drive the water into different locations. So we're hoping that can help manage some of things, as well as there's a surprising amount of old and potentially dead infrastructure out there that might be creating a conduit for some of this water to flow and like almost a big French drain on the hill. So we want to figure that out and maybe decommission some of that a little bit more deliberately so that it doesn't serve as a conduit to concentrate water. And then the debris bench, we'll look at more maintenance activities on that, taking the debris off, so it'll be available storage for more stuff that's going to slough off. I don't think this is something that we're going to stop. We just have to be able to manage it. And then I think we're going to implement the response measures that we talked about earlier next year and going forward. It was, I think, tremendously successful. I think we engaged a tree crew, I think 3 times, and then the 4th time we couldn't get somebody quick enough. So, but it really helps in our response. So I think that's something we're going to do going forward. And with that, opening it for questions.
First of all, thanks for thinking that through and being so proactive. Am I on?
No.
No.
Okay, so thanks for thinking, being so proactive. Really appreciate that. And it did seem like it was really quick response. So for the surveys that you're going to do, it sounds like you're going to do some sort of like post-mortem, right? But then also looking ahead. Is that what you're saying about looking ahead at other trees? Is that
So
what you're...
there's two parts. On Solano, it's more of figuring out what's going on, because that was a surprising result and we don't know why. And I think Albany Hills is a little bit of a different situation. We know where there's risky trees and we'll identify those and then remove those.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that when you do that assessment of other trees on Solano, that'll come before us. There's not going to be like emergency tree removals that we don't get to consider.
I don't know what the results of those studies, but if they hit a point of emergency removals, we'll let you know about that. But
Well, I mean, just emergency tree removals are a problem for us because we don't even get to consider. We just hear about it afterwards. So I'm just...
So on the emergency removals, what I've tried to do, and we're not specific about this, when we do it and need to do it, we want to let people know we wouldn't do it after. We would send out an email, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, so it doesn't catch people off guard.
Okay. I would hope if it's not obvious that it wouldn't just be considered emergency removal just because you happen to be surveying it. And
So we're not going to look to
Okay.
create an emergency. If it's an emergency, we will, it.
Thanks. I just want to make sure.
It hits a threshold.
Right. Okay. So we should be able to see the results of that survey. Okay. Thank you.
Question, so where the eucalyptus fell down at Taft, that used to be the steps that went up to the park, and you can no longer access that. Are any plans to?
Actually, I drove by it today. I think it's open, and it's not so much the tree that was the issue; it was the sloughing off of.
A little landslide, really. But,
Yeah, it's the sloughing off material, and that's another tricky area too, because that's actually the private property. We probably wouldn't have taken such drastic action if that tree wasn't such a risk to the power lines and the property next door, because this was later in the evening, and so.
Oh, that's private property there? I
Yeah.
thought that was being, okay. All right.
I think it goes 100 feet or so to the north.
Oh, interesting, okay.
Yeah.
Another question, you mentioned dead infrastructure a couple of times. Once on Marin, where you said that they were, the way you said it sounded like pipes, abandoned pipes were feeding into the trench or something.
Yeah, so I think, we walked a little bit, and then we started pulling out drawings. I think that area, and I don't have the entire history, was slated for development, and I think there were sections of the sewer system put in. So we were going there, and we saw what looked to be potentially like service laterals for properties, and it looked like mid-slope there was a sewer line. So we want to see what that is and see, you know, this is an area that's pretty steep and pretty vegetated, and I've never walked it before,
Yeah,
so,
interesting.
and we don't have drawings of it, so I was surprised.
And so you mentioned also you bought a tree crew. What is that like? It seems like everybody would want to buy a tree crew right before big storms. So,
Yes.
I mean, so was there,
With a lot of
were they
calls.
trained? I hope they were trained.
Yeah, so these were, so we have the tree crews that we typically use, and we just said, you know, we want you to be on standby on site, and, you know, some people say, you know, I can't make it at that, I'm already committed, and we found one company that we might be striking up a little bit more of a relationship so that we can get in their queue on these types of events. Because it was tremendously helpful in being on both the large eucalyptus trees to be able to clear Solano quickly.
I would think they'd get a lot of calls after the event, so that's great you got them lined up before the
Yeah,
event.
and part of my idea is, so if we buy 4 or 5 hours of their time and we really have problems, we're going to keep them there. So,
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. Any more?
Yeah, I had some questions. Last year, do you know how the stormwater got into the sanitary sewer? Because aren't those systems completely separate?
so in general, the stormwater gets in there through infiltration. This is one of the, excuse me. So this is on the north side of the city, between Brighton and Cerrito Creek. That's a sewer line that runs mid-block, and a lot of the apartments are right on top of the sewer line. Excuse me. So it's an old line, it's an undersized line, it's clay, so these are like all ideal conditions for infiltration to get in the line.
Oh, okay.
And then on top of that, it was, we think there was a big slug of, in sewer lines, a big issue is fat oils and grease, and it gets in on the inside of the pipe, and we think some of that broke free and then created a blockage downstream. And then that created the overflow.
Okay. And then there was that little landslide there where Taft and Hillside meet and the one tree fell down. There was a prior plan to upgrade that whole area when the ADA path went in at the top of the hill, and a bulb out and all kinds of things there. Would any of that, those plans were at like 95%, I think, at the end?
Yeah, so that's right. When I came to the city, that was getting the concept. So we developed the concept, but we didn't take it into design, partly because we don't have property rights in that area. And I think the idea that would have to be coupled with any sort of development of that site or working with the property owner.
Is that owner the owner of the 11-acre parcel
Yes, so
on the
that
Pierce
goes,
Street
that
side?
goes, that
Up and
goes from
over
Pierce
to
up
Taft?
and over, yeah.
Okay, so if there was some kind of deal with development on Pierce, it could potentially be,
I think that's
the thinking
community
is-
development's world, but
Yeah.
that's my understanding, yes.
okay. And then, because some sort of, if the city were to do something there along the lines of the plans before, certainly mindful of what we saw here, then that could help shore up that area and help prevent that. And then it looked like part of the big issue with the March storm was like root failure, like you showed those pictures. There might have been branches falling too, which is what we usually worry about.
Yeah.
And, but wow, this was whole trees toppling over from the roots. Is there, I mean, John's not here, but how does one, I mean, we are pruning roots to sometimes for sidewalk. Do you know if any of these had a lot of root pruning? or-
So we talked a lot about this, and we think there are two factors involved that with these failures. One, there was just a tremendous amount of rain through this whole period, and the ground was incredibly soaked. And also, the wind was coming from an unusual direction. This was really coming from the south, sort of the southeast, and I was at this location here, and it was like I've never seen it like that, blowing from a direction that I've never seen before. And so I think those two combinations were more of an issue. For example, the pomona tree was not one that had a sidewalk repair, so there was nothing related to the
It
sidewalk.
was a huge root ball that came up. And
Yeah.
do you know, is there a way to, does John know, or is there a standard way of predicting massive root ball failure like that?
I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to wrap our heads around on the Solano trees.
Yeah, because that's what happened, is they fell over from the base.
Right.
And, yeah, I would look forward to hearing more about that going forward. And then I live at the base of Albany Hill. At that March event, I can understand why you would have gotten a lot of calls, because it sounded like a jet engine. It was so loud, all the wind whipping through those trees, and just knowing that trees were going down.
Yeah.
And then with the Albany Hill Taft slope, you talked about how there's some sloughing off there, not just in that one location, but kind of up and down the
It's
road.
up and down, and on Jackson.
And I've seen that too, as I've walked up there the last few weeks, off and on. And do you know, so we see that with our own eyes, it's like staring at us. But of course, across the street on the downhill side, there's houses built onto that hillside, and even steeper slope. Do you know if any people commented on houses moving or foundations, or
So we didn't get comments around houses, and I'm not a geotechnical engineer, but I would say that the findings that we got from Nino Moore tell me that this is more of sort of a surface issue, and anything that's sort of founded into rock.
so long as they're into bedrock, they should be good?
And that would be something that whoever designed their
Community development would.
or whoever designed the foundation for the building would deal with. And I imagine they're pretty substantial foundations to be pinned on a slope.
That's it for me, thank you.
Sure.
Good. Thank you, Mark. That was interesting. Or,
Public comment on, I don't know.
oh, yeah, thank you.
Open it, just open it.
Public comment, questions?
No hands are raised.
All right. Moving on to item 5-3, Parks Operation and Management Update. Includes Measure M funding activities. Ended by Raju.
He's waiting on me to figure this out again. Okay, and now,
I could start with introducing myself. Some of you I've already presented in the past. My name is Razu Engen. I'm the Public Works Manager. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the maintenance and operations that we do at the parks and throughout the city, too. And then Devora is also going to be presenting a portion of this as well. Okay. So this is our semi-annual Public Works update. Kind of see an outline there of the items we're going to be talking about. Starting with the park status, some challenges and opportunities that we've had with managing parks lately. SB 1383 update. Go a little bit more into what SB 1383 is when we get to that. Prop 68 update. Upcoming work and the parks plan, and also parks funding. That'll be Devora's section there. We need a little clicker or something. This is kind of a broad overview of our Public Works Department. As you can see, we have quite a bit of different areas that Public Works manages, including capital improvement plan, right-of-way, which includes the utilities, the roads and sidewalks, buildings and facilities, including obviously City Hall and Community Center, as well as our Public Works Center, and other associated buildings throughout the city. Parks and playfields, open space and urban forestry, but that's mostly Margot and John's programs there. and then departmental management, which kind of encompasses a lot of other activities that feed into those. So you could see that the parks and playfields is a small section of what we do. We have a small crew, but we deal with a lot. So let's start out with an update on our updated approach. Those of you who saw my presentation about 6 months ago learned that we have a new maintenance staff structure. Previously, we had a single lead person and 5 maintenance workers kind of working underneath that lead person. And we've restructured it so that we have 4 lead workers with focus areas of responsibility, including 1 for parks, 1 for public right-of-way, 1 for buildings, and 1 for sewer. You get a nice picture there of Michael, who's our lead worker for the parks program. And then the other nice thing is we're starting here in a couple weeks, we'll actually have 3 maintenance workers, so a total of 7 on our crew, which is nice to have the additional staffing. Gives us the opportunity to do more work throughout the city and kind of catch up on some of the deferred maintenance that we have throughout town. And these are level 2 workers, meaning they're journeyman level workers. So they come in with the experience and not expected to know everything about all these different areas, but they do work, all 7 of them, even the lead workers, work in all the areas. So you might see Michael working in the buildings, you might see our sewer lead working in the parks, and so on. And then with this updated approach, one of the things, and we'll get into a little bit more later on, we've started a weekend overtime parks check, and this is to deal with some of the vandalism and graffiti that we've seen in the parks, but also to have a more responsive level of service in our parks where we get to trash and other issues before they become a problem and have to be dealt with in a remedial fashion on Monday morning. Another part of our kind of expanding public works family is going to be our small projects manager. Mark has a quick update on that.
Yes, so we're advertising for this position, and it's closed, and actually we are doing our interviews tomorrow. So we are very excited that we can get this person on board and start really moving on, particularly the Prop 68 projects.
Another part of our updated approach with respect to the parks is our coordination with the rec department. That's something that we've been doing for a few years now, and I think we're starting to have a really good collaborative approach with our rec department in terms of managing the parks and managing the activities that they oversee in the parks. And then, of course, community partnerships with various park user groups and even citizens that have, say, the community gardens that we have at both Ocean View and at Memorial Park, AUSD, who uses the playing fields quite a bit, as well as in recreation leagues and so on that are in the parks quite often. So I'm going to give a kind of a broad overview of some of the maintenance activities that we've had in our parks since the last update that we had. Memorial Park, over the winter, we had an opportunity to close down the ball fields, as well as a small section of the lawn, kind of the front lawn there, for aeration and overseed. We also applied compost to those areas, which is helpful in terms of not just the lawn and turf health, but also helps us out with our Prop 1383 compliance. Also in Memorial Park, we had significant post-storm tree cleanup. Nothing as impactful as what Mark described, but there were some significant branches and damage there that we're actually still even now finishing up. There was a section of Memorial Park tennis courts that were impacted by a tree limb that came down. And I think just today we actually finished putting up the top bar of the chain link fencing and getting the conduit reestablished for the lighting at the tennis courts. We also did aeration and overseed at the dog park, did some cleanup there, and repaired the irrigation. We've had some kind of low spots with wet areas. That just typically happens with the dog park. The dogs like to run around and roll and dig, and so you end up with depressions that collect water and create these muddy mess if you don't stay on top of it. Another thing that we have, and you can see a nice picture there, is the new batting cage netting. There's another batting cage that is used also by AUSD. We're looking at what we need to do over there, but for now we've got some new batting cage netting in the one cage that's next to the dog park, and then new windscreens at the ball field, and that was just completed, I believe, either earlier this week or last week. They finally had them all installed. At Ocean View Park, similarly, we did the aeration and overseed as well as the application of compost. We had a significant infield rework there, bringing in lots of new material. I think it was something like 40 or 60 yards of infield dirt, significant grading and cleaning up that area. Unfortunately, it looked great for a few days, and then we got an unusual storm that actually kind of took away a lot of the prettiness of it. I don't think we lost a whole lot of material, and we were able to regrade that back up, but it was unfortunate that we didn't get to have the pretty infield for as long as we had hoped. We also had the cleaning of the tennis courts. There was a small fire there, I think related to somebody had set up a tent there, and there was a fire that impacted the surface. Weren't able to clean everything, but it's definitely much better than it was post-fire. At Peggy Thompson, Pier Street Park, we had the Saha housing groundbreaking just this morning. So we did a significant amount of cleanup around there, washing things down, graffiti removal, as well as mowing and weeding the entire park there. That's the lawn section, cyclical mowing. That's something we'll do not just at that park, but also we do it at some of the other open spaces along, say, Buchanan and the area we call the Road to Nowhere, down underneath the East Shore Freeway. Those areas are, usually we don't do it quite this early, but with the significant rain that we had, I don't know if you've noticed, the weeds are pretty tall, so we're working to get that those areas mowed down a little bit earlier this year. At Jules Terrace Park, we closed off the lawn section there for aeration and overseed and application of compost. We've installed new tennis court tools. That's the squeegee and the broom there. Lets folks who are using the tennis courts kind of clean off the area, get a better playing surface. We've repainted the basketball half court, painted the new stripes, and I think we're still waiting on a new backboard and net there. So that should be pretty nice once that's done. We have the playground slide, had kind of a big crack in it. I think you guys got an email earlier about both that and the bridge section. So the bridge section we had repaired not too long after it happened, but it did have to be closed off because it was creating a pinch point for little fingers in there. And the same thing with the slide. Slide's got a damage on it, but we have a replacement ordered and just waiting on that to be manufactured and shipped out here. Apparently they don't just have a stock of, big plastic slides. They have to make it custom whenever there's an order because it's a big piece of equipment to have on storage. Hopefully that'll come in pretty soon. I am trying to follow up with them to pin them down on the actual day when they'll put it in. Some of the challenges and opportunities that we had, the winter storms presented a pretty big challenge that tied up our crew quite a bit for many, many months beyond what we were used to having. So they're still even recently responding to weather-related events. That's not usual for us. We would have had a lot more time to do some of the regular refresh things at the park and around town. We haven't gotten to those because we've been so needing to focus on response to the storms. The nice thing about the storms too, though, they brought in a lot of moisture. If you've seen any of the parks, the grass is looking wonderful. You know, we got wildflowers everywhere. It's really been great for the green areas in town. And then the SB 1383 compost and mulch procurement is, again, provides a good opportunity for us to amend the soils and get good turf grass. This is the actual removal of that tree on Taft that Mark was talking about. So they had to bring in a pretty large crane and had a guy coming off on the tree really high up. It was pretty amazing to watch that. It was a big operation. Some more challenges and opportunities. We are seeing a lot of vandalism at our parks. It does tend to be focused a lot in Memorial Park, but we've had issues in all the park bathrooms that have been costly and time intensive to paint over graffiti, repair things that have been broken or damaged with arson. We've had quite a bit of trash at Memorial Park because of it's gotten better, but early on in the pandemic when the high school was having their lunches outside, we were seeing quite a bit of impact of trash. That went away. You know, we were able to manage that for a while. It seems to have come back a little bit, but we're coordinating with AUSD to make sure that they can monitor their students and kind of help us deal with the impact of additional usage at the parks. And then, like I said, some of the response we've had to the increased vandalism. We're having this weekend park check. We've adjusted the park bathroom hours to try and not have, say, the bathrooms at Memorial Park open too much earlier than the school starts, so you're not having kids that are bored waiting to get into school, maybe getting into trouble at the parks. And then same thing at Ocean View. We've adjusted the hours with the adult sports league that they have going on there. We've had to extend the hours again, so they are open late again, but we've been monitoring that a little bit better. And then obviously coordination with AUSD and our rec department to ensure that we're monitoring all the bathrooms and catching those things as soon as we can and, to be able to address them. So SB 1383, put this as an update, but maybe I should start with what is SB 1383? This is a state law that passed a couple years ago, and it's a solid waste diversion law. So they're trying to get more trash to be diverted from going to the landfill and increasingly going towards compost and recycling. The part that really matters for us is that in terms of this commission is that it mandates a certain amount of purchasing of recycled organic materials. So that could be, the main thing we think about is compost, but that also can include mulch products that are sourced from recycled waste streams. So we have an annual annual procurement requirement of 1,364 tons, and that's per year, every year, until they take this law away, which it's a significant amount of material to purchase. So 2022 was our first year of dealing with this law. They didn't have, for 2022, they waived the actual fines and fees that they would have if we didn't meet that requirement. They're trying to get people to be on board during this first year. So last year, we had 220 tons of compost that was applied at the ball fields and parks in those ways that I mentioned earlier. We had about 27 tons were given away in the compost giveaway, and then 10 tons of miscellaneous applications. We purchase some mulch for use around city buildings. We also, on certain infrastructure projects, sometimes they'll have mulched areas next to the sidewalk project, for instance. We have them purchase mulch that meets the requirements of this law in order to apply it there. With all that, that was about 18% of the total requirement, which is, you know, we're not quite there where we need to be. But I think it's a good step in the right direction. Give an idea of what this is going to cost going forward. The application cost of those 220 tons that we applied at the ball fields and the parks was about $20,000 to $25,000. I don't have a good exact answer for that because it's kind of some of that is baked into our aeration and overseed program. So that's you just see that it's not a line item on the landscape contractor's invoice. Going forward, for 2023, they didn't have this at first, but they decided they were going to do a phased-in requirement. So 2023, this calendar year, we're required to meet 30% of that target, so 410 tons. Our plan right now is to repeat the same usage we had in 2022, it's about 257 tons. We'll do a second ball field application. This will be not as intense as the one we did over the winter, but that'll be approximately 110 tons at the ball fields and different areas of the park, and then hoping to expand it to other parks, and including even the Ohlone Greenway and Key Route medians. Those are great areas for spreading the compost. I would like to point out that the ones we did last year and these ones we're programming for this year, that's the low-hanging fruit. Those are the ones that's easiest to spread. You know, you could easily take wheelbarrows full of compost and spread them out on the, you know, a flat field. Once you start getting into smaller areas and areas that are more geographically dispersed, it's going to increase our costs significantly. It's going to increase the difficulty of finding those areas to put this stuff. So we are going to be running into that pretty quickly, where we're having to think a little bit more about how we do that. To that end, we've engaged with a consultant. We came up with a GIS-powered tool to kind of decide where we could plan to apply compost and mulch. We've also have a waste consultant who's helping us beyond that simple tool to find other locations we might use, and then partnering with Cal Recycle, who's basically the agency in charge of implementing SB 1383. One of the things that's going to become more and more of an issue is we're pretty much. I haven't really. I don't know if I could say we really baselined with other areas, but our sense is that we are well ahead of the curve of other peer cities in terms of being proactive about looking at these requirements and really taking them seriously and trying to think about, hey, how are we going to do this going forward? So we've got the low-hanging fruit, but that also means that we've got the easiest so far places to purchase compost and find other supplies. As we go forward, there's going to be a lot more competition for that same amount of material. Presumably, there'll be more material available, but it's not necessarily going to come online as quickly as these requirements are coming are coming due. The other issue that we've had is with the mulch quality issues. Because of the way that the law is written, we can't just use chipped mulch from the trees. Say that if there's tree pruning or something like that, that's not mulch that meets the requirements of this. It turns out that there's a couple different qualities of mulch. The most common one that you can actually find that meets these requirements, it turns out to be chipped pallets. So it's not very high quality wood. They usually sell it as a dyed product, which can some people like the dyed look. It really just doesn't turn out to be a good quality product. And then, like I mentioned, overall supply of both mulch and compost.
One of the things that's apparent to me through this is that there's going to be a limit of what we can use ourselves. So it's going to be other partnerships with, I can see AUSD, USDA, UC Village, other places that might use it, and even things like the compost giveaway that we had this last weekend, more so that we, as I understand it, the credit isn't we have to use it on our own facilities, but it's used within Albany, so residents that use it. So I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach to really meet our requirement.
Thanks. I think that's all I had on SB 1383 for now. And then Prop 68 projects. These ones, we have project plan sets kind of in the works for some of them. Other ones need a little bit more planning and design work before they can be completed. As Mark mentioned, we have the small projects manager candidates that will be evaluated tomorrow, which is really exciting. And we have a phase plan, kind of phase one. Some of the projects that we already have plan sets are kind of plug and go, and some of the phase two ones that you can see there, we're going to need a little bit more work before we can implement them. But having that small project manager to both implement the projects and also help with managing design and planning is going to be really helpful towards delivering on these.
Sorry, what is the difference between phase one and phase two?
So the idea of the Memorial Park lighting, we already have plans that are done. Dog Park, we have a concept that we're working from, and we're just putting together more, I wouldn't call them a full-blown design. It's more of, similar to what we do with our sidewalk repairs, it identifies the extent of what we're doing, but it's not like a stamped set of engineered drawings. And then the pickleball, again, we know what we're doing, we just need to move it forward. And both pickleball and the dog park improvements will come to the commission before we go out to bid. So that's all baked into it, and we're starting to get those things moving. And as soon as this person comes on board, I mean, this person's going to be, don't do anything else. And then the other ones, the Totlock, Terrace Park, and then Peggy Thompson. These are less baked, and I think we would need more sort of input on the commission. They're not, in my mind, they're not huge projects. They're, I think the Terrace Park was shade structures and dog park amenities. So I think once we figure out what we want, kind of a easier lift in implementation.
Is that, I'm just curious, do you all remember, I'm looking at Todd, do we actually decide on those things, like the Terrace Park? Something like the master
In the
plan?
master plan,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, so it was the
We're
master
working-
planning process.
We're working directly from the master plan process.
Okay,
And actually, I think
yeah.
we'll see that in the next
I think
slides.
that is
Okay.
the next slide is the master plan.
Nope.
Nope, sorry. That'll be right after this. Some of the, beyond Prop 68, some of the other upcoming things that we have are the non-cyclical maintenance tasks, including tennis court sealing, crack sealing, to kind of extend the life of that surface. Park trees survey, there's too many S's there. But Parks tree survey that John will be heading up to look at the quality and health of the trees within our parks. We had the play equipment safety evaluation just yesterday, so we'll probably have some efficiencies or things we can improve on that will need some immediate attention. Beyond what we already know with the slide and other issues that we're currently working on. And then the Friends of Albany Parks, the rec department is starting that back up and has their first cleanup scheduled for May 20th. So we definitely encourage folks to participate in that.
Just a quick note on the parks tree surveys. I'm not, I think some of you may have been on the commission when we did this several years ago. We did a survey on all the trees within the park, with all of the structured parks. And that helped with maintenance tasks as well as identifying trees that maybe we need to talk about and what to do with them and make decisions on planting new trees and so forth. So the idea is that we will do this at a periodic basis and then be able to have a conversation with the commission about the trees.
Can I ask a question? Just about the equipment safety, since that was just done yesterday. We got that public comment, and it sounds like some of what that, I don't know, you were talking about that public comment that came in about Terrace Park and specifically.
Yeah.
And some of that might have been addressed, but there was that one thing about the swings, just the plastic covering the swings degrading, and I can see how that hurts the kids' hands. Was that kind of thing addressed in that evaluation, or would that be kind of out of
This
scope?
is the first time we're doing it with this particular inspector, playground inspector.
Okay.
In the past, yes, they have identified things like that, but something like the swing chains kind of having some wear on them, that's something that even if they don't find that in the playground safety inspection, that's something that members of the public can let us know about. That's a pretty obvious maintenance issue, and we can just
That you could just deal with as needed, okay.
That's an easy one. The thing that we're looking for with the play equipment safety evaluation is the non-obvious ones, things that are considered hazards that maybe to the untrained eye you wouldn't necessarily notice.
And just a process question, does that mean that will be addressed with the Terrace Park swing?
Yeah.
That's something
Okay.
we'll have a work order in for replacing those chains.
Okay, and just, Jameer, I don't know if this is a question for you, but, we get these comments, and I feel like I want to respond to them. I mean, given that it will be addressed, is that something that somebody within the Parks Department would respond, or you, Mark? I don't know.
We could do some sort of response. Typically, the best way to get this on our radar and get a response is and I think this will be a slide later.
Towards the end. Yeah, you
towards
can
the
actually go like 3 or 4 slides ahead. I think you'll.
We'll jump and then we'll go back. We have,
Yeah,
not
there
too
you
far. The service request, this is the best way. I know sending emails to folks, that gets it on people's radar, but in terms of being able to execute and follow up, this is the best way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that could even be a standard quick reply to that person who sends that, like, here's the way to do it, okay.
Yeah, and that's, we want to drive more and more of those emails because, in our world, when something comes in like that, it comes to me, it comes to, and then we're all, okay, how critical of an issue is this? Something like fixing the chains, or is this something bigger?
Yep,
So
okay.
Thank you.
now I got to go back.
Thank you.
Oop. Next one, are we done?
Thank you. And then I think this feeds into the parks, how we came up with this Prop 68 projects. This came from the Parks Master Plan. These are the near-term projects, and you can see those that are identified as Prop 68 projects. There's a couple other that are already in process as part of other planning, including the active transportation plan. Coordinates Creek Trail, I believe that one's going to bid, or?
We just went out to bid yesterday, I think.
Okay. And then there's a couple other ones that are we've identified as near term that are fall into the Public Works court, including sustainable landscapes and turf audit. Not moving on those. We need to focus on one thing at a time, but those are on our near term horizon here.
Yep. So we have, in my mind at least, the turf audit and sustainable landscapes are connected, and they really kind of go to our planning for SB 1383. I think some of the things we want to do is eliminate the amount of turf we have. That'll help both water conservate. We spend, a fair amount of money on water, so we want to reduce the amount of water as well as reduce the maintenance costs. So finding something that uses a lot of mulch or compost and is more sensitive from a maintenance perspective. On the flip side too is we also want to identify areas where we want some sturdy turf, like in our Memorial Park. That's that large turf area on the south side of the park. That's something that really got beat up during the pandemic. I think the western side of that we did the compost application looks good compared to the other side. So we also through the turf audit want to find out where we want more playable turf areas, as well as ball fields too. We have ball fields that take a different regime in terms of maintenance. Oh, sorry.
And then kind of closing out my section for new stuff here, I've mentioned the Albany exercise equipment before. This was actually one of my projects for construction when I started here. Unfortunately, the exercise equipment, particularly the ones with a lot of moving parts, haven't lasted and performed the way that we would like. We're thinking that the best, we want to figure out what the best use of that space is, and swapping out or maybe keeping some of these, the elliptical machine and the bicycle machine. Maybe those are ones that we can continue to have and maintain, but definitely there's a couple other of the overhead press and the row machine just kept getting beat up in a way that wasn't really possible to maintain those. And in fact, you could see in this picture here, we have a kind of missing machine there. We'd like to put that maybe to the commission that say, hey, we'd like your input on what should go there. We're happy to kind of develop some ideas from our side and present it to you all, or if you all want to have a subcommittee that looks into those spaces and works with us to develop that plan a little bit more before we bring it to the full commission, that could be an option as well. But definitely, the more stationary pieces of equipment there are still in great shape. They get a lot of use, particularly with kids coming up and down before and after school, and even the preschool across the street. You see quite a bit of that. It was envisioned initially, I think, as to more of the senior center folks, and it does get some use there as well. But it's proven to be a nice space for everybody. We want to keep it that way and kind of improve on what's there.
I had one thing to maybe go back on. I think Commissioner Chan Frank, you had a question early on about morphing the flex court to other facilities in the parks. Is right that the flex court subcommittee, I think, and I can't read it exactly. I think there is something in the master plan that links to what you were thinking, and so
there's two flex sport courts things there, items in the near term. One was system wide, and one was specifically at Memorial Park.
Right. So I think there's linkages here that have this in the 0 to 3 years. That's open game in my mind.
Yeah, we could talk about that during the
Okay, I just wanted to point
item.
that
It would
out
be
here
helpful
since
to. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I think we'd have to talk about where that would be. Yeah, what sort of property that would be.
Yeah.
In. Okay. I mean, if you're here, I don't know when you're taking off, but it would be helpful to hear what's possible. I know we looked at the baseball field, and that looked like it might not be a contender, given the size.
I mean, talk about it tonight.
No, I mean, just to get, yeah, I would love to hear your ideas of the scope of what we could even consider, because I think we've been I don't know, I feel like we've sometimes been limited by like, oh, we can't do that in that space, and yeah.
Well, I think we found that the netting system that was like the one that you could raise up and down that could handle 3 sports, volleyball, badminton, and tennis, wasn't good for a competitive tennis court, but like Memorial Park, but could be a great candidate for Terrace Park and Ocean View Park or wherever, or wherever we have other tennis courts. So I know Ocean View is going to be pickleball, and so I don't want to get into that. But it seems like there still is a place for, looking into those, and yeah.
Yeah, and I guess my point of pointing it out tonight, I don't think I'm prepared to have that discussion about tonight, but and I think that would be something that might be worthwhile, and I don't know how that gets done, and I might need to go check with Ansu if this is an ad hoc committee. I don't. We'll need to.
Yeah, that's helpful.
But I think what I wanted to do is say this is
Thank you.
contemplated in the master plan, and then so I think it's perfectly appropriate that we charge off on it, and
Okay.
it's more of the structure of how that happens.
Yeah, we don't have to go back and ask for it to be on the work plan because it already is. So yeah, great, thank you.
Raju, is that the end of your presentation?
I think Devorah has a couple slides here, and
Should we
then,
take questions from
Great.
now or wait for the whole thing?
wait for the whole thing.
Okay. All right.
All right. Good evening, Commission. My name is Devorah Zotterer. I am the Program Manager in Public Works. My role, we all wear many hats, but you'll see me in the context of our operating budget, departmental operating budget, and also in the context of our capital improvement program budget. I manage allocation and distribution of a lot of our special revenues, making sure that the tax funds are allocated to the purposes that we committed to voters, and that we're using our funds efficiently and to support the purposes that are communicated to us and that we hold as values within our community. So those of you who have been on the commission, you've seen this slide before. You'll see in front of you our Public Works operating budget, and our manicured parks program takes up about 12% of our current Public Works operating budget. Our Creeks and Open Space program, which encompasses Margot's work on Albany Hill, vegetation management on the bulb, and work in all of Albany's 5 creeks, has its own program. That program is currently 3%, and you'll see increases in the upcoming biennial budget for increased work. And lastly, we have a our street tree program, which encompasses everything that happens in urban forestry. So parks, our approved budget for fiscal year 23 is $710,000. When our finance director brought a mid-cycle budget update to our council, they approved another $35,000 to add to that 710 for the rest of this fiscal year. Specifically, that $35,000 was allocated for increased weekend services in our parks in response to increased trash management that was needed, and just general management and stewardship of the parks. And additionally, we've seen increases in many, many areas last year due to the changing economic climate. But we saw increases in landscape management services and maintenance services, graffiti, increased usage of our graffiti, and increased water usage with necessary maintenance that needed to be done.
The font's really small. I can't actually read it, and the presentation is not in the agenda, so I can't read it on my own device. So can you read off what's there?
Sure, absolutely. You'll see that the Public Works operating budget, the bulk of our operating expenditures at 29% are sewer maintenance, our sewer enterprise. We also have 12% for storm drain, and then 43% for maintenance as a whole, and 16% for administration, which includes costs associated with regulatory requirements that are not specific to one maintenance area. Now, within maintenance, that 43%, and forgive me, I did not adjust these numbers for that 35,000, so parks may be up to 12.5% or something. But this diagram will be updated next time with the new biennial budget. Within maintenance, we have that 43% breaks down into 12% for parks, 11% for buildings and facilities, 12% to our public right-of-way program, which includes sidewalk maintenance, street landscapes, and general roadway maintenance, 5% for our street trees, and 3% for our creeks and open space program.
And these slides will be provided, uploaded after the meeting.
These are just, this operating, it's not the such staff salaries though, right?
This does include
does?
Staff across our whole program, yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
But that's all in the admin fee? The staff isn't in the salaries?
Thank you. Actually, our staff is allocated out by functional area. So in all of these programs, you'll see an allocation of our maintenance staff based on, again, functional area. Our capital program staff, for example, engineering staff will be in our, who work on sewer projects will be in our sewer program, and so on. So for example, our new position, you'll see in the biennial budget, the new small project manager is currently divided between parks and buildings and facilities, since at this time that's projected where the bulk of their work will occur. We wanted to be thoughtful about allocation of costs across these different programs, all of which have different funding sources, so that we're putting the staff costs as appropriate for the function they are serving in maintaining these areas of our city. I think next slide. So this commission's favorite topic, Measure M, it was passed in 2018. It is also known as our Parks and Open Space Parcel Tax. We maintain a webpage for this funding source. It is, and on this, Mark, if you don't mind opening that up, I can kind of walk through it a little bit. While he's opening it, I'll tell you, we include a summary of our revenues and expenditures. We include details of the programs and projects that are supported by this, and then we include financial reports, including details of the tax levy for this funding source. You might have to.
And it's for maintenance and improvements as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So our strategy for this tax, thank you so much. Our strategy for managing this tax revenue is to allocate as much as is, in my opinion, fiscally responsible to support our maintenance activities, to, and then also to be programming some of these funds towards, for example, the Prop 68. We use Measure M as matching funds for the Prop 68 grant allocations. We use, well, how about I walk you through the webpage and I can show you some of the, so you'll see at the top of this page, this is a photo of some of our recent work. Yeah, scroll up if you don't mind, just a little bit. No, you're fine. Fields look great. That is a part of our parks maintenance program, and Measure M, you'll see in our biennial budget, we allocate a certain amount of funds to the program as a whole so that we can budget more thoughtfully, as opposed to trying to carefully match to like a specific type of expenditure, because needs change. We live in a dynamic city, in a dynamic system, and it's more thoughtful and more reasonable to budget in this way. So on this webpage, which is on our city website under Finance and Administrative Services, you can find it at albanyca.org/measure-m. And we include a history of the tax, including the text of the ordinance was passed. We have, some of you have likely seen this before, had some formatting changes. We link the tax revenues, by fiscal year to date. You can see, including the current fiscal year as budgeted. And then also linked, so you can see we average approximately $470,000 to $475,000 per fiscal year. And then we've also, there's a chart here of what has been expended to date, including, like since the inception of the tax, including this fiscal year as budgeted. These numbers are updated after the city council accepts the annual audit and comprehensive annual financial statements. So also on the webpage, we have details of our, will you go back to the webpage?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, you're fine. I'm very demanding. You can see as you scroll down, we have some, with these drop downs, you can see we have some details and links to the budget for our different programs. Measure M supports our parks maintenance program. It supports our urban forestry program and our creeks and open space program. We have certain amounts from that tax revenue up to a certain percentage of annual revenues programmed to those three programs, and it supplements funding from other sources, including our assessment district 88-1 funds. And period. So those are our three major programs that are supported by this. We also show some information here about our Prop 68 project suite, which you've heard about tonight. The council also approved for our street tree inventory, they approved a combination of funding. There's not much there yet, sorry. But they approved a combination of funds from the Climate Action Plan reserve and from Measure M to support that inventory. And then lastly, as mentioned, we budget with an eye to using a certain percentage or of projected annual revenues, but we want to make sure that we have an eye to the needs that will be coming up through the Parks Master Plan, which outlines a lot of exciting and ambitious work and rejuvenation of the city's park facilities. So we keep some funds in reserve so that we can, when we get into a new CIP process, we can then allocate those funds to those priorities that you all and the city council have indicated are highest or need the most support. And then lastly on this page is details of the fund administration, including annual reports from the city's financial consultant, NBS, and I don't want to duplicate what finance does, so a link here to finance's page where you can review the annual audits, which include Measure M and its own fund with all details. So the last thing I'll say, if we can go back to the slideshow,
Wrong one.
is-
Hold it. Yikes. There you go. Nope.
the last thing I'll say is just that
What did I?
it is our goal and our vision to be able to utilize the funds that the voters and our residents entrust us with to invest in the priorities that the council and the commission have indicated are highest, and to try to use our resources efficiently. And where this is coming up for us is, Mark mentioned, actually both Mark and Razu mentioned that we spend an incredible amount of money on irrigation and water, and something that's coming up for us in the next fiscal year is we'll be doing some investigation of that. East Bay Mud has a water budget program, so we'll be doing some investigations, seeing if we can optimize our irrigation usage, if there's any cost savings to be had. We may find that our system is already optimized, but we may find some good news for our budget. We also want to use staff and our contract services wisely. And a big part of what you're seeing in our approach to the Prop 68 projects and other projects coming out of the Parks Master Plan is that we want to make sure that our projects are really baked and have a good plan before we really get into execution. Because that's where you see the highest costs during these capital projects, as I'm sure you know, that when things need to change kind of mid-cycle as opposed to having been planned thoughtfully before. Sometimes you can't avoid that, but when you have a really good and a really baked plan ahead of time, that's the most efficient way to use resources. And yes, thank you, and including a maintenance plan in that kind of initial scoping of a capital project. So we don't just build something and not be able to support it afterwards. I think that's all I've got. I guess I'll speak to our construction alerts. So you've heard tonight about the service request portal as a place to direct people to as a really efficient and responsive way we can integrate people into our process. The other place that we are sharing information is on our construction alerts webpage. I won't ask you to go to this one, that's okay. But we include details of our active, upcoming, and past projects. We update it at least once a month as we get new information, especially when construction is high, construction season is high, and there is an e-notify system people can sign up for there that when we send out push notifications, they can be notified. We'll be working more on our public engagement strategies in the coming months and years. So we hope to document what we're doing and be able to communicate to people in a way that really invites people to be part of what we're doing and helps keep people assured that that their needs are being met and being looked after.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess questions?
Yeah, that was it for our presentation, so.
Great.
You have questions?
Sure, there's questions.
Yep.
Sorry, Karen.
Well, thank you. I have a question about the Measure M. Is that something, I mean, I should probably know this, is that, it sounds like it's being used to fund staff, but, right, that's what we were talking about, staff salaries. But before we had Measure M, was it just general fund? Or have we always had some sort of partial tax that, I'm just curious.
So prior to Measure M, and this was a little bit before my time, so I think that's why Mark came back. The city supported a lot of its programs in parks and recreation with Measure R revenues.
Okay.
And in addition to general fund. So, and then our third funding source there was our lighting and landscaping assessment district 88-1. I wanted to address, if you had a question in terms of.
So I can jump in. I think maybe if I might be reading in a little bit, the nut of the amount of general fund that we've allocated to parks has roughly stayed the same through before Measure M and after. So where we've had program growth, things like the overtime, the scheduled overtime for maintenance workers and things, and we've added a maintenance worker, and those are sort of program increases.
Right, I'm just wondering if the promise of the parcel tax was that we would be expanding program. I need to read up on that, so I'm not expecting you to interpret all that, but when does it expire? Do you know?
I don't think it does. I don't think there's a sunset to it, and it's
just an ongoing parcel tax for.
And it's tied to inflation.
Oh.
And I think that was one of the struggles with the 88-1, that it hasn't been updated since 93 or 94. So.
And that's still a tax on, it's still, okay. But at least this one rises with inflation, so.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
I had a bunch of questions. So I had some Measure M questions, I guess, to follow up on. One was for which part of the expenditures or other slide shows the funds available for capital improvements, new projects, as opposed to maintenance?
So I don't believe we've included a number here, and I don't have that number in front of me today. I can tell you that we previously allocated approximately 80% of annual revenues towards maintenance activities. And with increases, I believe we've upped that. Well, I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse. You'll see the updated allocation in the biennial budget coming up. So what has remained that has not been used for maintenance each year has been moved into, has essentially been left in the fund as reserve for these projects that come up.
Mm-hmm. And on the part that said capital improvements reserve, like that line item, is that the total in the reserve every year that we're seeing, or is that how much money was added to the reserve every year, and the total is the sum of all that?
It's not the reserve balance. So in those two tables, you'll see that the bottom lines match based on the audited revenue every year. So for the revenue, except for this year, which of course has not closed and has not been audited yet, each of those years shows the audited usage of funds for that year. Mm-hmm. So I suppose you could add up, don't quote me, I want to make sure that I'm not telling you a number that I'm going to have to go back on, but each year the revenue has been broken down into what has been done with those funds, including what has been kept in reserve.
Okay. And then, let's see, for Measure M.
Actually, could I add a comment to that?
Yeah.
Which is that, so we talked about this a little bit before at previous meetings, which is that there are multiple ways to fund projects coming out of the Parks Master Plan. Measure M is and keeping that in reserve is valuable to us, not just to fund the bulk of projects, but to act as matching funds for grants, so part of what I like about what I do is when we are able to identify these priorities coming out of the Parks Master Plan, there are a lot of considerations that go into what projects happen next, what projects happen when, and what scale. Part of that is, do we have the staffing to complete it, as you're seeing with this process of the parks, the Prop 68 projects, that we're making that work in that way. So the indicator to whether a project will be possible isn't necessarily just how much money we have in the bank. It is how can we utilize that money and those funds? How can we scope projects in such a way that they're competitive for grants? So that all kind of goes into that consideration. So it's more than just that bottom line.
Okay.
It's how we use it.
I think if knowing how much is in that reserve that could be used for capital improvements for new projects, I think that's something this commission would like to know and have it highlighted, or just like a simple number that says what's the total amount of money in that pot that's out there that could potentially be tapped into. And you've explained that, it can be used for matching funds and other things, leveraged in various ways. But just knowing how much of it is available for non-maintenance for new things would be helpful. And I'm sure it's in the numbers there, but just having like a simple final number for us would be helpful to know when these reports come forward. Another comment is partly just about the agenda for a question about for Measure M, is that this is one of the few times that we have the public has an opportunity to get some oversight on how Measure M funds are being spent. And the last several times, the Public Works Department has done this semi-annual report for us, and Measure M hasn't been mentioned. And I've brought it up every time to please put it in, and it has been put in, which is great. But if someone could make a little note somewhere that just like the next time, mention that Measure M will be on the agenda.
I'll jump in there. That was my oversight this time on the agenda.
Okay.
But we corrected it. Thank you for pointing.
Yeah, it was corrected, which is great.
We're absolutely putting it as just, we're somewhat new to the game here, and so we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
Somehow a note to future self that when it comes, yeah. Okay, great. And then I had other questions too that weren't Measure M. Are there other questions people had?
I don't have anything Measure M related or finance
Or
related.
just on Measure M?
Which one of us do you want?
I have questions on, a couple questions, but I don't think it's Measure M. One was kind of when you showed the breakdown of the fee, I was just doing some numbers in my head and said, for instance, the street trees was 5% of the total, which meant 35,000 for both John's salary, I think, and all the work. That doesn't seem to make sense.
The overall budget for John, this is not the total budget for street trees. This is just, I think,
The piece from Measure.
Oh,
the Measure, this is just the component from Measure M. There's
got it. That's
there's
what-
a general
all right,
fund
the
piece and
numbers
an
into it,
88-1 piece that adds up to a larger number.
The chart.
Yeah.
So one thing that might be making that look somewhat low is that you have to, so our budget, our whole departmental budget is approximately $6.6 million.
Okay.
And a chunk of that is sewer. So while those percentages, perhaps it's a little misleading, I can include something going forward in terms, and actually have the dollar amounts.
Oh, I'm glad you kind of explained to me, because that was shockingly low. I was amazed.
No,
It's
it
a
might
piece
be.
of the bigger puzzle. All right.
Yes, I can see that it would be effective to have dollar amounts, but, you know, our sewer program, I think, is, off the top of my head, something like 1.2 million, so a few hundred thousand doesn't balance against that.
Okay, great, thank you. Move on, any more Measure M questions? Did you get any more? Commissioner Martin? Any more Measure M? So I have couple questions on the mulch. It really got me interested.
Do you want me to go back to the SB 13?
Well, maybe, you could probably answer some of these without it. So you mentioned that it's clean, whether it's clean or not. So does that mean it's coming with trash in there, or nails, or pressure
Well,
treated
I had a
wood?
question about nails from pallets. Is that?
No, they have a process to chip it and clean it, and they only use clean pallets for the mulch.
it really
It's
only
still a lower
pallets?
quality mulch than you might get if you just used the arbor mulch, which is, you know.
Yeah, because I've seen it on the tree wells on the street. It's like these huge chunks of
Yeah.
wood.
Yeah, it's not as attractive as we would like. You know, if we were going to just go out and purchase mulch, we probably wouldn't buy that particular product. But because we're trying to meet these purchasing requirements, we're trying to experiment with different styles of mulch and see where we can get a good product. There is a very nice product that John found that does meet the SB 1383 requirements. It's a very good-looking mulch, you know, kind of a darker, undyed material, has a lot of good organics, nice and heavy, doesn't float away when you have heavy rains. That one is very, very expensive, much more expensive than, you know, if we just go to a local supplier and purchase it, and that one comes from further away. So it does meet the SB 1383 purchasing requirement, but we're going to be thoughtful about where we use that because it is more expensive and comes from much further away.
So the state law requires us the city to buy the mulch.
It's not free?
Not necessarily mulch. It can be it needs to be a certain amount of organic recycled material.
That's been certified, that came from our recycling bins, basically.
Came from a recycling facility, and unfortunately, the way that the law works, if you just have your arborist come out here and do some tree pruning or even a tree removal and chipping that chipped material does not count as a waste material because it is considered something that people would purchase on their own. They're trying to create a market for stuff that people aren't currently purchasing, and they're requiring cities to be the purchasing agents for that.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a convoluted way, but the state wanted to create this market for recycled organic materials, and so they're requiring us to purchase a certain amount.
Well, I just want to make a comment on that because I used to work professionally
Right, yeah.
with that, but because it almost seems absurd. But there are some climate mitigation impacts. So it's not only that the organic material out of the landfills helps not create greenhouse gases, but also the application of the compost itself is a carbon sequestration mitigation measure. So I just want to point that out. So not to say that it's still not really hard for you all to deal with, but that is one of the sort of benefits that it's not just about, it's about creating a market because of the potentially huge climate mitigation benefits.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. It has driven us to look more into compost, which we hadn't been using very much, if at all, before this. And I think it's had great impacts, like very positive impacts on our playing fields and other turf areas. It not just carbon sequestration, but my understanding is applying compost regularly can help retain moisture for the plants to use, so you don't have to have as much watering, in much healthier plants and so on and so on. So it has a lot of benefits too. And I'm not going to say that, again, this is put in there as both a challenge and an opportunity because it does have a lot of good things too. Unfortunately, the purchasing requirements are pretty onerous, and I don't mind saying that.
So a couple more comments on it. So it doesn't, if the city's being kind of, I guess we're not being forced to purchase it, but might happen at some point. We're being encouraged. They're not fining us if we don't.
Not yet.
But if that does happen, I mean, there are a lot of people that would probably want to use mulch, but they don't have the method of getting it. They have small cars and, then going back and forth with free mulch.
Yeah, and that gets to, I think, something that Mark brought up, that we're going to have to be looking at being very creative with how we meet this. Simply applying it to our playing fields is not going to cut it. We're going to have to find other places where the city can act as a purchasing agent, and then it can be applied by USDA, AUSD, and even by citizens throughout.
Well, I'm just thinking if you could just dump some in people's driveway, they give you 2 yards, and you can drop it off.
Yeah.
So I do think community development is working with the Giltrack farms to distribute compost, I think. But I like your idea of loading it up in a truck.
You have to pick it up yourself, though, right?
Yeah, but loading it up in a truck and just driving around and.
Taking the family car and filling it with mulch.
We'll just beep the horn, and if people want mulch, we'll just dump it in their driveway.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Have a different, yeah.
the compost events are very popular, right?
Oh, yeah,
they're lined up. I'm just thinking, you've got to buy it, but just bags of it at Ocean View where the mulch is now, just people come and get it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more and more of that stuff. This was, quite frankly, we were very opportunistic with the 2022. It was, we do the winter, okay, how much compost can we get on the fields? And I think over the years, we're going to be more strategic about what we can do. And I think things like the compost giveaway events, it's amazing.
And compost sells. Is the reason you can't sell it to the,
I'm sure we could, but.
I'm going to say our finance and risk folks would like us to look into that further before we commit to taking on that one.
I have a lot of ideas that Devora shot down, but.
and here's another that came to mind as we looked at this crazy number, which I wonder where that number came from. 1,300.
It's a per resident number. Yeah. So the smaller cities.
There's our density biting us in the end. Okay.
Our density does hurt us. Yes.
So we're going to package it up, and everyone has to come up and pick their little package and take it home.
Pilot on the, go ahead.
Systematically removing dirt from my backyard because it has built up over the years, and I need to clear some space. I'm having to move like 4 inches of dirt just to get back where it was when I moved in 20 years ago. And there's going to be more. That's what this makes dirt. But anyway.
And then I think one of the things, for instance, with this compost giveaway that we had this past weekend, because it is a recycled waste product, people have to know that this is recycled waste product. This isn't clean compost that you might go get for a farm. People need to, if you went to the event, you saw there was a waiver collection station. And people had to sign a waiver that this is a recycled waste product, and they do the best they can to remove any pathogens should be processed out through but there could be heavy metals, there could be other toxins or stuff in there. I think they have a pretty good, clean product, but there's always a risk that small amounts of something might be in there. And so it isn't so simple as just, hey, let's give this out to people.
I had some mulch-related questions. Like, for example, we've had people ask that the dog park be year-round, and one way to do that is to mulch it. Is that something that could be brought on an agenda with the Public Works looking into? Sounds like you've already been looking into all these different types of mulches. I didn't even know there were all these different types of mulches. And
We've considered mulching that area. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a slope, and having mulch, and then it's particularly mulch where you have a bunch of dogs running and digging on a slope, I think you're going to end up with a lot of spillover. But it's not saying that we won't do it, but it's not.
that's a potential challenge.
It is a challenge,
but
yeah.
Could be graded or whatever.
Yep.
And then another was the Albany bulb. I think the city was quoted $12 million to cap it or something, and there you go.
I'll let Mark handle that one.
Sure, a mulch cap works on that.
Yeah.
We have thought, the soil quality at Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park is absolutely horrible. And that's one of the struggles we have with the trees growing and whatnot. We do have thoughts about that would be a place to stockpile large amounts and just let it sit and develop and hopefully develop something that something will grow in.
Any more questions for?
Yeah, I've got some other questions. Let's see, dog park mulch. Let's see. Related to compost, you mentioned spreading compost on Memorial Park. Is that something like? What type of compost is that in the sense of, like, if kids are rolling around in it or whatever, how, does it soak in or just laying on the grass, or how do you compost the grass, and how is that, are there issues with kids getting in it?
It's spread out in a relatively thin layer. I think for the winter one, because the parks are closed during that time, there's sufficient time for it to mix in and become basically part of the soil there. For the summer application that we're considering, we probably have a much shorter closure time. Maybe we talk about a day or two. And then we'd want to be thoughtful about how much we can apply so that it is safe when the kids come back. And other field users as well. But that is something that we do need to consider.
Yeah. I think this is one of the challenges. The ball fields are ideal for the compost because they're mostly fenced and we have controlled access. Some of the other areas we put up snow fencing, and I think that worked reasonably well. But as we get smaller and smaller spots, that's going to get harder and harder to manage in terms of access to the sites. So that's a real thing we're kind of thinking through.
Okay. And then real quick on the email we got about Terrace Park, one thing that wasn't mentioned was the broken gate latch. Is that something that's on the radar?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to respond to that email today, but that is something I will mention to the person that will take care of those.
And the small projects manager, it sounds like they have a lot to do with Prop 68, which is great. We look forward to hearing more updates on that soon. What do you see them doing going forward, just as just new capital improvement projects come up?
So we have a similar backlog in the building side. So there's going to be building projects as well. Since the Prop 68, we have timelines on them and things, and there's a clamoring of the public. We want to get those projects. So that's going to be the first thing out of the gate. But then, you look at our Parks Master Plan, this is going to allow us resources. It's largely parks and buildings, and we'll go back and forth through those projects. One of the things that I see on the building side that this person will do. Out in the plaza out here, the concrete is really poor shape and is, bordering on dangerous with, they have the wood slats in it that are decaying, and I know of people who have fallen, like upgrading that with lighting and things of that sort. So there'll be projects like that this person would be doing as well.
Okay, so it sounds like as other funding comes available, or?
Yeah, so it's this person isn't sitting all in parks. This person is going to be doing, and I imagine over time, there's going to be shifting needs of, okay, we're taking care of a lot of things in parks. Now we maybe need to focus more on buildings, or, the idea is we have difficulty executing a project that is beyond something that we can do with our own resources, our own staff, but maybe doesn't have the scale of a full-blown capital project that we can go hire an A&E team, a project manager, and whatnot. So the idea is that this person would be responsible for all of these projects, and for better or worse, a lot of them live in the parks and buildings.
Yeah, and so hopefully we'll see better turnaround times on all that. The public will see better turnaround times. For the play equipment safety evaluation, is that something we'll get a presentation on in the future?
Yeah, I think the idea is, if we do one of these, we would go to the next. We plan on another one of these.
Yeah, I think we've reported on the this is kind of a cyclical thing to have the safety inspections. I think we've reported on in the past the findings from that and how we've responded to those findings.
And we won't wait till, if there's things that need to be done, we'll start.
Away, yeah.
We'll
work on it.
We'll say, here's what we found, here's what we're picking off, here's the things we still need to do.
Okay. On the upcoming slide, there was the advertisement of the May 20th cleanup day, which is great. Glad to see those are coming back. I wanted to, since we have new staff and Jim over here, that's usually at the beginning of our meetings, it's nice to have, there's an announcement section for commissioners, but also for staff. And so if you can brainstorm with people in recreation and public works, announcing that kind of thing at the beginning of the meeting would be great.
I did make a note so that way I can speak with recreation prior to the meeting. So that way if they have any announcements such as that I can make sure that I announce them.
Yeah.
And that was on, again, I was hoping to get into it, but my day and week seemed to have evaporated on me.
Usually we get a number of recreation announcements and things. That'd be great to check in with them. Thank you. And then let's see. I think that was it for me. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions of the?
I just have one quick question. We talked about the email we received about Terrace Park. We also received an email a week or two ago about kind of the crescent seating structure that used to be a sculpture, used to be an earthen sculpture, Memorial Park. Any plans for, is that part of the maintenance that we've heard about it?
Yeah, we talked about that at we have a regular kind of coordination meeting between us and the rec department. That, it turns out, is a actual art installation.
Yes, it is.
So it would need to be addressed through the artist and through the Arts Commission for guidance on what we should do.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, too, that email included a compliment on the increased service of the park, too.
Yeah,
So, and I took that as.
I just brought it up to set you up.
But yeah, we did talk about that, and I think
Well, I mean, my
idea that they
understanding, my
proposed
memory
was-
of it is that it was just an earthenware, shape, and the grass was supposed to be there. And the artist was involved for a couple of years and finally gave up. And that's when it became a bench and steps went on top and all this. So I don't know what's involved now, but.
So we did, again, we spoke with Rec on it, and apparently there are some,
Still
like,
some-
to
still some
change,
strings
well,
there.
to change anything there, we have to go back to the artist and do it. So it's something I'm learning, we're learning
I
more
know it's
about and what we
something.
need to do, so.
Very good. I think my other questions were asked, so I think
All right, thank you. Well, thank you very much. That was a lot of information.
a lot of.
Yeah, and good luck
Thank
on
you.
the interviewing tomorrow. I hope you
Yes.
find somebody very organized and tenacious. And yeah, I wish you luck
All we
with
need
that.
is one.
Yeah, it's true. All you need is one.
Great.
Well, moving on to discussions and possible action. Oh, hold it, we have no comments from the public, right, or questions?
No, hands are raised.
Okay, thank you. Discussion and possible action on matters related to the following. 6-1 is street tree management plan. We need to select a commissioner to represent the commission reviewing consultant proposals. When do those come in?
So we do have proposals. So this came out of the idea of, we did a very similar thing with Transportation Commission when we got reviewing proposals for the streetlight evaluation that's going on right now. And having a commissioner sit in and, review proposals, involved in the discussion is, we think, beneficial. So we open it to you guys could select someone or volunteer.
Thank you for considering that. I know when we first talked about that proposal, it might have been Jeff Bond, but we talked about that and requested that. I know that Commissioner Kent and, sorry, you're a landscape architect too, right? So I would defer to the landscape architects.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
personally, so.
I would nominate one of them as well.
Yeah.
I think I'll vote for one. I think we're set.
I still want to do it, but if you want to.
Have a second?
No, I think I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in being on that, being representative from the commission.
Do we need I don't know how that, do we need a
If we
vote?
vote, it goes in the minutes, so.
Okay.
Okay, so roll call.
So we move to.
motion?
Oh.
Yeah.
You select.
I'll make the motion. We'll,
So
Make
change,
make a move to select Chair Kent to be the representative for the selection.
And then do you need a second or?
I'll second.
Perfect. Commissioner Abbott,
Yes.
Commissioner Bensman,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang Frank,
Yes.
Commissioner Martin,
yes.
and Chair Kent.
Yes.
It's approved.
6-2, subcommittee report. Anything to announce on our Flex Court subcommittee?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Is there an update on the purchasing of the thing that we approved?
I don't have an update. That I know Rec is taking care of that. I can find out for the next meeting.
Who did you say was taking care of?
Rec.
Oh, rec, right.
Recreation, okay.
And I think it was after the next fiscal budget, which starts in.
That sounds right.
July.
July.
Okay.
I think it would be good to talk about what we might want to focus on
Yeah.
next for this committee.
I had a question, and this is my, maybe not, so the ad hoc committees have a beginning and an end, so
do.
that, to avoid the Brown Act stuff, so it predated our involvement, so just wanting to understand more of the scope and when that end is.
The only thing I'd say is that we did say this was going to be a pilot, and I know that Isabel wanted or was thinking that it might be helpful to get some input about how to organize the reservation system. That's something that, one of us could look into. But, and then also that the pilot would determine whether or not we might install the system in other courts like Terrace Court or Terrace Park. So I don't know that we're done with our mission yet.
That's what I wanted to kind of wrap my head around in terms of, where's the beginning and where's the end.
Yep.
I guess we don't really have really clear defined.
So along these lines, a subcommittee can't be a majority, right? And we're a 5-person commission right now, aren't we? Or are we still a 7-person commission?
So as I understand it, it is a 7-person commission, and that.
So we need 4 votes to pass anything, to approve something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I did speak with Isabel, and she said the council will be discussing 2 people for the student seat and another adult affiliated with the student seat. If the recommendations are approved by the council on Monday, then they will be able to attend the June meeting.
Okay, so it's just been illegal till now. Okay.
Okay. It's, thanks, Jamara.
Yeah, the council's restructuring how those other two, it used to be school board chosen positions are going to be handled, and apparently it's taken until now to sort that out, and so hopefully on Monday that'll be sorted out, and then instead of the school board choosing, my understanding is the city council will choose, and then hopefully we'll have those people on board for our next meeting, I would hope, yeah.
Okay. No updates on the Flex Court Subcommittee, other than what was discussed. And that concludes our meeting. Any more?
Future agenda items.
Thank you, right. One more item. Future agenda items. Commissioners announce or request any future agenda items.
I just had a question, Jamara, is what the organization is going to be for, Mark, I mean, I know that Isabel said that we're transitioning to not be at these meetings. I'm just wondering, is there going to be a Parks and Recreation staff person going forward at these meetings?
I think it'll be a lot like when there's an issue or a topic on the
Okay.
agenda, then they would be here, but I don't think they would normally have an attendee.
Okay.
Okay.
So then who would, like, the chair meet, like, who does the chair, just for my edification, who would the chair be discussing the agenda? Okay, so
Jamira.
with you, okay. Okay, so the.
Jamira is a Jamira is the staff liaison for the commission.
Right, but, okay, sorry, just your title says Public Works, and so are you also Parks and Rec administrative, or, no?
No, I work in Public Works.
Oh, okay.
The city doesn't have a Parks and Recreation department. It's called,
The Recreation Department.
Recreation and Community
Right.
Development.
So-
We're kind of, we handle the maintenance side of parks, rec
Right.
handles the program side of parks.
Okay,
I did work in recreation for since 2005 to 2015 or so.
oh, great. Within Albany, or?
Yes.
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah, I
So
started
that if
at-
there's any questions, you can always just talk, okay. Okay, that makes sense, that's great.
Yes, Jamara is kind of a quiet wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
That's great for you to have that history, it really is, I appreciate
She
that.
keeps us in line.
For future agenda items, I had a couple things. One is tree removals. So, of course, we were supposed to have a whole litany of tree removals at the April meeting, but we found out at the last minute we didn't have a quorum.
Yep.
So is there a reason why those are not on this month's meeting? Are we trying to stick to a strict quarterly?
No, actually, John could not make it tonight.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's that. So we typically do them quarterly, and so
Right.
his calendar was full on a non-quarterly, and so we're bringing him in June.
So June.
So we'll be
We're
hearing
not
that
going to wait till the
item in
next
June?
quarter. We'll do them in June. Okay.
Yeah, June, which
So that's good to know. The public should know that, have those people who've emailed us, have they gotten a message about that? Is that something the city can do?
we're putting together responses to all those emails, and we'll be sending that out.
Okay, because some people had complained about the amount of notice, which I think the city duly noticed all of them, but people still complained about the timeline, that wanted even more time, and so the sooner they get an email saying when the agenda, we have a rare situation where we know a month in advance that it'd be great if they could be alerted to that.
Sure.
And then I was looking up for the sand volleyball potential court at the Bulb. I see that in our existing work plan, one of the item number 9 is provide recommendations for enhancing parks and open space, including Albany Waterfront Park. So it's already on our work plan. So I don't think we need. I think that's something that we could potentially agendize.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sand volleyball court in the Bulb wouldn't be city jurisdiction. We asked Isabel that question, because it's not.
That particular location, it looked like it wouldn't be city jurisdiction.
Right, but maybe you mean somewhere else on the Bulb or somewhere else, period?
That's a really good point. I guess, I mean, maybe it would be an agenda item to do a subcommittee to reach out to the body that does oversee it. If it's East Bay Regional Parks, and Elizabeth Eccles, or, would be our representative, or do you know whose jurisdiction that is?
It's East Bay Regional Parks.
And so Elizabeth Eccles would be our district's representative on that. If you,
I've dealt with more of the maintenance, the on-the-ground maintenance staff.
people on the ground, yeah. Okay.
Just one follow-up on that, though. After that meeting, Councilmember Jordan emailed me with like a city council response. So anyway, so it's from his email, just can update you all. And he said that he was planning to put the sand volleyball court on our work plan for next year, but that would be July, right? Or he might propose for it to be on the Parks and Recreation work plan. I don't know if we could hurry that process by asking, but it's almost July anyway, so I think.
Yeah, that could be fine. I was just trying to, it seems to me that one could argue that it's already in our work plan, and if we wanted
Yeah.
to work on it, we could, although you reminded me that it's not technically on our land, so that's a little bit of gray area. Todd, you've been around a while, do you have any sense of? Well, there's also Caltrans land. We plan stuff for Caltrans land, too.
Yeah, the beach is not Albany, right? That's East Bay Regional. We would be the bulb proper or the neck, but, or the, I guess, plateau. But it doesn't, it's not limited to the waterfront. So if you had a concept for another location.
Another location. Mm-hmm.
We're good too.
Okay. And do you folks know what might be, besides the tree removals, on our next agenda?
We did have a thought.
Or an introduction to the new small projects?
That would be spectacular if we could do an introduction of the small projects project manager. I think we. We are finalizing the tree inventory, so I think a presentation of that, that system from the was it Arbor Pro? Yeah, Arbor Pro. That will be on the agenda. Cool. And I just escaped my mind. I was we look at that.
Okay. Any more discussion on future agenda items? No?
Any public comment on that?
I see no hands raised.
Okay.
With that, next meeting is set for June 8th, 7 PM. Close this meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is it